question here is, how is intellectual property handled and safeguarded in Saudi Arabia? Are patents and patent pending safeguarded? Does anyone want to speak to that? Me? Technically, there is a system of patent registration in Saudi Arabia. My understanding is that there aren't sufficient or perhaps any patent officers in Saudi Arabia to actually register those patents, and so what people end up relying on is registering a GCC patent.
No, King Abdulaziz, for science and technology, they register patents.
Yeah.
There is a patent registration.
There's a system.
Organization, yes.
I don't have much to say in that from the perspective that I've been in Silicon Valley most of the time, but from my interaction with the folks at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, that was a big priority for them because in attracting the faculty from abroad, that was, of course, a big issue that did come up. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of work that's been done to address that.
I think that's right. I think there is a system in place, and there may just be some further work on actually implementing it. And yes.
There is a law. There is a law in place to protect IP, as well as Hamid said. There is a special department, King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology, that will register patents. They're a little bit slow, but there's regulations for that process, and it's fairly active.
Great. Are there any other questions? Anybody have any comments?
I wanted to ask a number of the panelists a specific question, and start with Mr. Kumar. The U.S. Department of Commerce, a few years back, so far back I can't even remember the year, started a very innovative program with SMEs and technology between the U.S. and Israel. And both governments have put up the money so that if you fail, you didn't have to pay for it. The success of this program was something like 97%. It was spectacular. Why hasn't the government tried to replicate this, or why are they not using all the successful experience we have at the university, like the advanced technology centers, the labs that the universities help the leadership or the innovative individuals to do?
If I may, it's this is a classic case of damned if you do and damned if you don't. You're suggesting would be pick up technologies and help scale them and pick winners and losers, and the panel has just told me that governments pick losers better than winners. So let me just address conceptually what we do. We do not as a country pick winners or losers first. The second stuff, it is a market-based economy. The U.S. has always stood for free markets, will always do, and we don't have category champions. So let me briefly clarify what we do believe helps SMEs. And let me characterize it with a physical example. We have what we do essentially for small and medium enterprises is matchmaking. This is getting parties together to consummate the entire commercial transaction. So match US companies with Saudi companies so that it'll be a win-win. That's what we do. And we do that, we don't subsidize. We don't give any handouts or dollars because some of those misconceptions prevail. On the other hand, we provide these services, it's priced, but not always priced to market. Typically what we call a gold key would be $2,300 for a big company. And for a small SME initially, that's at a discounted price of $700. There is a market disparity which sometimes will preclude small and medium enterprises because they don't have the wherewithal, nor can they afford the big bills which come with all this. In that sense, the US and foreign commercial service can be best described in two ways. One, it is America's sales force. So it's not always possible for every small and medium enterprise to have a sales force everywhere, but we do have 1,425 people across the world who provide that service. Secondly, it serves as the surrogate export department for a small and medium enterprise. So, I mean, I spent my entire life in the private sector, and I used to run companies like Johnson & Johnson's worldwide businesses. They don't require necessarily the support, but the small and medium enterprises do. So we create a mechanism which is at best a facilitation of trade without necessarily either picking industry or picking a company in terms of winners or sales. Specific to the question with respect to what happened, I wouldn't know in terms of the US-Israel arrangement which you said for SMEs. It doesn't exist, but we continue to have several companies interested in dealing with Israeli companies or companies for that matter in the Middle East, and we provide them the service of connecting the two. In addition to that, and this is open to everyone, we don't again differentiate between one company or the other, we have various programs which include, as I referenced in my brief comments, trade missions and inward bound programs. And all these programs, particularly those leaving the United States, are in the Federal Registry. So any company which wants to enroll based on the criteria can do so. Our role, we believe, is to facilitate commerce and create a framework. Governments don't necessarily create jobs. We create a framework which allows private sector to innovate and create jobs. And I think that's the ecosystem which you heard from Len.
Yes, I'd actually like to address specifically what you're talking about. I am an SME with the emphasis on the S. I managed to survive 3 years, and with the help of commercial service, this is an unpaid topic here. I truly want to say that I've done more in 3 days than 3 years, and during 20-hour flights between here and Dubai and Dammam. Anyway, with the help of commercial service, in particular, Mr. Jim Fluker in the Riyadh office, I've done more in 3 days than I've done in 3 years. Yeah, I've done more in 3 days than 3 years. Now, there are some comments, though, that I want to make. About 10 minutes ago, I took a phone call from my partner in Dammam. And to all the Saudis here, I would like to say Assalamu alaikum. And I also wanted to compliment Dr. Fakir
Yeah.
For hustling his product, because that's what we do. I mean, we're great at elevator speeches. The challenge I see in going back and forth in these 3 years to Saudi is that even though the commercial services are being a great help, I would think that there is a great demand for a similar service within the kingdom. My partner has literally had his hair go gray trying to negotiate the various, let's just say, personal relationships, trying to figure out who, where, how to contact people. And yes, commercial service is doing a really good job in helping me contact people, but I can see a very definite need for a similar service within the kingdom to help the Saudi citizens to do the same thing and I will be, since one of the great things about this conference is people have been very upfront, maybe even to the uncomfortable point, but I would prefer that than the opposite. The problem we run into, of course, is typical of the kingdom. You run into personal relationships and who knows who, and the standard joke line is, my prince knows more than your prince knows. And the other typical blunder for a first-time American in Saudi is to have the businessman come up and say, we want an exclusive with you. And unfortunately, I fell into that trap, but I've managed to extricate myself. I guess the point being that I really appreciate commercial service.
I have offered up today something which has been offered up for the first time. We call it a reverse platinum key. what in effect is looking at our domestic field, and we have offices in this country in virtually every state with the exception of Delaware and Alaska, which we cover fairly well through other locations, offering up our services right across our chain where Saudi SMEs or indeed Saudi companies wishing to connect to the right partners in the United States can do so, and we at the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service in Saudi Arabia can make that happen. So this is a completely new approach in the event Saudi SMEs are looking to export or import.
That works really well, and that will certainly help. The trick is making that link between.
The local is something, which is the point you make.
You know where I'm going with that one.
Yeah.
And as a businessman, you know, we specialize in vocational training for heavy equipment operators. And I guarantee you that there is a need for that in the kingdom. However, trying to get, again, to get my Saudi partner to talk to the right people within the companies, it's just, let's just leave it at a challenge.
It's a challenge.
I'm being polite.
Dr. Bakr, you're an example of someone who's taken an idea from concept to a business. Can you talk us through the journey and what some of the challenges you faced?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Basically, the idea was, as I said, the product of our research at UC Berkeley, and it was actually an idea that my late advisor came up with about 5 years ago, and he gave it to me as a research topic for the PhD. So I've been just exploring and exploring the field to understand what's going on and the potential of what we're doing. And as we went, we realized that what we're doing is a game changer there. And I was encouraged by several of my profs to go ahead and start up a company about that. But the process was not easy, and for a startup, you have to be very, very lucky for the thing to work. So a lot of people get into startups thinking that it's an easy thing to get it work, but they don't. The reason why they think that, because they all hear about the success stories of startups. They don't hear about all the ones that failed. And reality is that there are a lot that fail. And the reason is for your startup to succeed, not only do you have to have the right idea, your timing has to be right, your go-to-market strategy has to be right, the financing has to be aligned with your targets. So a lot of stars have to align for the thing to work. But I have to say that I was very fortunate that throughout this process, the people that we met on both the business side and the technology that joined our ventures, I could not, in one way or shape, sort of like reverse engineer that process and say how we got these people. It was just a purely coincidental process. But all I can say is when you try and take the initiative, good things will happen. And you won't know whether or not they're going to happen unless you try. So we still have a long way to go before I can actually, speak firmly about it and say, well, we did this and this and this and that. I hope we're going to be a success story when all's said and done. But in reality, there isn't like a formula really for success. You're just going to have to find your way through the maze there. But I have to say that also we did get a lot of good advice from people who have been there before. And And it's important to listen to those who came before you, so not to replicate the same mistakes. You got to figure out a balance, not exactly to take everything they say as a gospel, because you have to understand, since you're starting a new business, it's unique and it has there are unique aspects about it that has not been encountered before. So you have to take that into consideration and establish a balance between listening to those who came before you versus listening to your own voice on what to do next. The other thing is that one of the biggest traps that entrepreneurs fall in is that, especially those who are coming from a university and college and who want to turn a research idea that they have into a product, they have to ask their question: do I have a problem looking for a solution, or do I have a solution looking for a problem? So a lot of times people develop a technology and they're so obsessed with the technology that they developed that they're eager just to find the problem where that technology fits. And that's mostly that's the biggest trap that a lot of entrepreneurs, especially those whose idea is technology oriented, like ours. So what we did was, before we raised any serious money, we started the process, or developing anything, of talking to customers, trying to understand their needs. What is it that you want, and how is the existing, what's there in the market not satisfying your need right now? And using that, we developed our idea where we want to go.
Omar,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think we're out of time and there's a closing session. This is really fascinating,
I
and maybe
appreciate
you all could talk further.
Thank you very much.
offline.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you all very much, and thank the panelists for